What if the thing you call control is actually the thing that keeps you from being free? Think about how much of life is spent trying to hold things together. You try to control your future. You try to control your money, your career, your relationships, your reputation, your health, your emotions, even the way other people see you. You make plans, calculate risks, imagine possibilities, prepare for disasters that have not happened, and rehearse conversations that may never take place. And underneath all of this is a quiet belief. If I can control enough of life, perhaps I will finally feel safe. But there is something strange about this. The more you try to guarantee that nothing will go wrong, the more frightened you become that something might control promises peace, yet often produces vigilance. You begin watching everything. You watch the market, you watch your partner's mood, you watch your bank account, you watch your body, you watch your progress. You watch yourself. And eventually, life becomes something you monitor instead of something you experience. Perhaps that is why control can become exhausting. You are not merely living, you are supervising your existence. But life has never been particularly interested in following our supervision. The weather changes, people change, bodies age, plans collapse, money comes and goes, relationships evolve, opportunities appear unexpectedly, doors close without asking whether you were ready. And no matter how carefully you've arranged the pieces, something will eventually move. This sounds frightening until you notice something important. You were never actually controlling life in the first place. You were participating in it. There is a difference. A person can steer a boat, but they cannot command the river. They can plant a seed, but they cannot order it to become a tree by Friday. They can care for a relationship, but they cannot control another human being's heart. They can prepare for tomorrow, but they cannot possess tomorrow. And perhaps freedom begins when we stop confusing participation with control. Imagine a person walking through a forest during a storm. They see branches moving violently in the wind and become frightened because the trees will not obey them. So they begin shouting at the wind. They demand that it stop. They become angry with the clouds. They blame the rain, but the forest is not malfunctioning. The storm is simply happening, and perhaps much of human suffering comes from doing something remarkably similar with life. We look at something changing and say, this should not be happening. We look at uncertainty and say, I need an answer. We experience fear and say, I should not feel this. We lose something and say, life has betrayed me. We make a mistake and say, I cannot allow myself to be this person. The struggle is not always the event itself. Sometimes it is the demand that reality should have been different. And this is where surrender is misunderstood. Surrender does not mean becoming passive. It does not mean giving up your ambitions, abandoning responsibility, or allowing life to happen without making choices. Surrender means releasing the impossible job of making reality obey your preferences. You can still act. You simply stop demanding that action guarantee the outcome. You can work hard without worshiping the result. You can love deeply without possessing another person. You can save money without believing. Money can eliminate uncertainty. You can make plans without believing. Plans are promises. You can protect what matters without pretending that anything can be held forever. This is a much quieter kind of strength. It is the strength of water. Water does not defeat the rock by fighting it. It moves. It finds another path. It goes around. And eventually, over enough time, the rock changes too. There is intelligence in yielding. There is power in flexibility. There is freedom in discovering that not every obstacle requires a battle. So take a moment now and imagine that you are somewhere far from the noise of ordinary life. Perhaps you are sitting beside a river just before sunset. The air is cool, the sky is wide. The water moves slowly in front of you, catching pieces of fading light. There is nowhere you need to go. For these few moments, nobody needs anything from you. You do not need to be impressive. You do not need to be successful. You do not need to understand your life. Simply notice your breathing. Do not improve it. Do not control it. Just notice air enters, air leaves. Your body knows how to do this without your supervision. That is interesting, isn't it? One of the most essential things keeping you alive is happening without your conscious command. Now, listen. Perhaps there are birds somewhere beyond the trees. Perhaps you hear the river. Perhaps the wind touches the leaves. Notice how none of these things are asking your permission to exist. The river does not ask whether it is moving correctly. The clouds do not ask whether they are beautiful enough. The evening does not worry about whether tomorrow will arrive. And for a moment, let yourself belong to this same world. Feel the weight of your body. Feel the ground beneath you. Let your shoulders soften. Let the breath move by itself. Now imagine that all the things you have been trying to control begin appearing in front of you: your future, your career, your finances, your relationships, your reputation, your health, your plans. See them as objects floating on the river. You reach toward one, you try to hold it, but the current continues. You reach again, and slowly you realize something. Holding everything is impossible, not because you are weak, because everything is moving. Now, imagine opening your hands, not because you no longer care, but because you understand that care and control are not the same thing. Watch the objects drift. Some remain near you, some move farther away, some disappear around the bend. And notice what happens inside you when you stop trying to grab them. Perhaps there is fear, let it be there. Perhaps there is sadness. Let it be there. Perhaps there is relief. Let that be there too. You do not have to control your feelings any more than you need to control the river. Now imagine meeting a version of yourself who has spent years trying to control everything. This person has achieved many things. They have money, they have recognition, they have a beautiful home, they have built a successful career, they appear confident. But look closely. Their hands are still closed. They are still watching, still calculating, still wondering what might go wrong. And then imagine another version of yourself, not more successful, not richer, not more admired, simply more at ease with uncertainty. This person still has responsibilities, still has desires, still makes plans, still experiences disappointment. But they no longer demand that life guarantee their happiness. They can enjoy what arrives without needing it to stay forever. They can grieve what leaves without declaring that life is broken. They can make decisions without needing absolute certainty. And perhaps you notice something. The second person is not controlling life better. They are simply fighting it less. Sit beside that version of yourself. Notice their breathing, notice their open hands, and ask quietly, what would remain if I stopped trying to guarantee everything? Perhaps the answer is not emptiness. Perhaps what remains is life itself. The river, the breath, the sky, the next moment. You may still have goals, but they no longer need to carry the weight of your identity. You may still want wealth, but wealth no longer needs to promise immortality. You may still want love, but love no longer needs to promise permanent security. You may still want success, but success no longer needs to prove that you deserve to exist. And perhaps, for the first time, ambition becomes lighter. When you stop demanding that life obey you, you can actually participate in it more intelligently. Think about a dancer. A dancer cannot control the music. They respond to it, they listen, they move. Sometimes the rhythm changes, sometimes they miss a step, and yet the dance continues. Imagine trying to dance while demanding that every note arrive exactly as expected. You would become so concerned with controlling the music that you would forget to dance. Isn't this what happens to us? We become so concerned with making life safe that we forget to live. Someone spends 20 years building a career because they believe that financial security will finally allow them to relax. But when the money arrives, the fear of losing it begins. Someone tries desperately to keep a relationship exactly as it was when they first fell in love. But people are not photographs. They change. Someone becomes obsessed with maintaining their appearance because aging feels like losing control. Yet aging is not a personal failure. It is simply what bodies do. Someone tries to control every possible outcome for their children and discovers years later that love cannot eliminate another person's freedom. The tragedy is not that control fails. The tragedy is that we sometimes measure our lives by how successfully we prevented uncertainty. But uncertainty is not a mistake in the design. It is part of the design. You cannot know everything because life is not a finished object. It is unfolding. And perhaps that is why the future feels frightening. It has not happened yet. But the unknown is also where possibility lives. If everything were completely predictable, there would be no surprise, no discovery, no genuine encounter with anything beyond yourself. You would not be living. You would be reading instructions. There is another kind of control that is even more subtle, the attempt to control yourself. You tell yourself how you should feel. You become angry because you are anxious. Then anxious because you are angry. Then ashamed because you cannot stop being anxious. The mind begins fighting itself. One part says, I should be peaceful. Another says, I am not peaceful. Then another says, I should not be bothered by that. And suddenly, you have built a prison out of self-improvement. Perhaps peace does not always come from controlling the mind. Sometimes it comes from allowing the mind to be what it is without immediately turning it into a problem. A thought can appear without becoming a command. Fear can appear without becoming a prophecy. Sadness can appear without becoming an identity. Uncertainty can appear without becoming an emergency. This is not weakness. It is awareness. And awareness is different from control. Control says, I must make this experience different. Awareness says, I can see this experience clearly. That small difference can change everything because once you can see something without immediately fighting it, you are no longer completely trapped inside it. You can choose your response. You can act without panic. You can wait without paralysis. You can change direction without believing you have failed. Perhaps this is what freedom actually feels like, not having complete control, but no longer needing complete control. You stop asking life, can you promise me that nothing will go wrong? And begin asking a quieter question. If something changes, can I meet it? That is a very different kind of confidence. It does not come from believing that you can control every wave. It comes from discovering that you can learn how to move with water. So perhaps losing control is not the disaster you thought it was. Perhaps some forms of control need to disappear before a deeper kind of freedom can appear. The future will remain uncertain. People will remain unpredictable. Your body will change. Your plans will change. The world will continue doing what the world does. And still, you can live, you can make choices, you can love, you can build, you can rest, you can begin again. You can allow the river to be a river. And perhaps, eventually, you realize that the life you were trying so hard to control was never asking to be controlled. It was asking to be experienced. So, Come back to the breath, feel it moving without instruction. Notice the body sitting here. Notice the room around you, the sounds, the silence between sounds, the thought that may be passing through your mind. You do not have to stop it. You do not have to hold on to it. Let it move like a cloud, like a wave, like a bird crossing the sky. And perhaps you can loosen your grip just slightly, not on life, but on the demand that life must unfold according to your script. There is still room for ambition. There is still room for planning. There is still room for responsibility. But there is also room for surprise, room for change, room for uncertainty, room for things you never expected. And maybe that is where freedom begins. Not when the world finally becomes controllable, but when you discover that you can remain present even when it isn't. You do not need to know exactly where the river is going. You only need to notice that you are already moving with it. The next moment will come. Then another, something will be gained, something will be lost. Some doors will open, others will close. You will change. The people around you will change. And one day, you may look back and realize that the moments you thought were interruptions were actually part of the journey, the unexpected turns, the unanswered questions, the plans that failed, the people who left, the opportunities you never saw coming, the seasons you wanted to escape. They were not outside of life, they were life, and perhaps freedom is not the ability to keep the river from changing. Perhaps freedom is the moment your hands finally open, the moment you stop demanding that the water stay still, the moment you realize that you were never meant to hold the river. You were meant to be carried by it. And perhaps in that surrender, you discover something wonderfully strange. You were not losing control of your life. You were finally letting yourself live it.